Well, good evening on behalf of Harif, the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and welcome to this special lecture, which we have put on in the wake of the terrible events in Israel, especially of the Hamas massacre of the 7th of October. And before we start, I just want to say Harif stands with Israel, the entire people of Israel, and our hearts go out to the families of the dead, to the injured. We wish them refuah shlema, and we hope for the safe and speedy return of the hostages. So for those who don't know us, Harif was set up to educate about the history and culture of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. We've got a website, www.harif.org, and we urge you to subscribe if you're not already on our mailing list. It's free. This session is being recorded, and we will get the recording up as soon as possible. It'll be on the Harif website. We're also live streaming on Facebook. If you have a question for our speaker, please do write it in the chat. Do not raise your virtual hand, because there are quite a few of you out here.
The virtual hand is okay.
The virtual hand is all right. The real hand is not.
Not, but that's only at the end.
At the end. Okay, but in the meantime, just write your question in the chat.
And if you haven't named yourself, the iPad or iPhone or Wonder Woman, you will not be allowed to ask an actual question.
So the disembodied voice belongs to Lawrence, my husband. I'm Lynn Julius, and Lawrence is our technical expert tonight. On to the subject of our lecture tonight, which is: who are Hamas and what is their ideology? Well, there's been a huge amount of analysis and commentary, but there's not been much explanation of the roots behind the Islamic resistance movement, because that's what Hamas is an acronym for. Who are they and what is their ideology? What is the reaction of the other Arab states to them? And here to answer these questions, we are hugely privileged to have with us Professor Norman Stillman, who will be familiar to those of you who've been following our Zoom lectures. He's already given us two. Dr. Stillman is a world authority on the history and culture of Islam, as well as being an expert on Mizrahi and Sephardi Jewry. And Dr. Stillman is kindly donating this lecture to charity, and we have chosen for the donation to go to the JNF, who have done tremendous work in the south of Israel and will no doubt be involved in rebuilding these shattered communities. So Dr. Stillman is joining us from Jerusalem, and there is a chance, I should warn you, that if a rocket siren does go off, he might have to take cover for a few minutes, but I hope that won't happen. Anyway, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Norman Stillman. Noam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And good evening or good day, since people are here from all over the world. As Lynn has mentioned, the print and online media, public lectures, discussions, and other forms of discourse right now are replete with detailed information, shocking images, and if you could just show the first three. The second one is Ashkelon. The first one was in Kfar Aza, and now the saddest of them all. This one is a child's room, also in Kfar Aza. they're replete with these images. The Arab, actually, Hamas has although now they consider it a mistake, have shown even worse things. There are op-ed pieces and analyses of the war that began with the horrific attack by Hamas against Israel on Saturday, October 7th, which, as you know, was the Jewish Shabbat and the festival of Shmini Atzeret. Actually, as I was getting to synagogue that morning, the sirens first went off, and we actually did hear explosions in the distance. The attack that left some communities in total ruin, with some 1,400 people killed and nearly 4,000, in fact, now over 4,000. The numbers change every day. Can we have the next image as well? This was from 2 days ago, and as you see, now the numbers are even higher. And of course, they're still discovering bodies. And as for the number abducted, that number, even the Israeli figures, have passed 200 at this point. Can I have the next one as well? And here you see just the kinds of rockets that have been hitting Israel, from very large to missiles down to small body-launched rockets. And here you have a map showing you many of the places in southern Israel that have been hit, and in some cases completely decimated, like Kfar Aza, for example, and some of the other ones along the Gaza border. Now, there have been innumerable accounts of the tragic slaughter of innocent civilians, which include men, women, children, even infants, and the elderly, and the taking of hostages, some of whom in Hamas videos we can see being beaten through the streets of Gaza. I must say, most of the media has the decency not to show these things. A Hamas spokesman claimed this past Tuesday evening that there were some 250 hostages. We still don't know what is the number, because Hamas took hostages, the Jihad al-Islami, the smaller extremist organization, took hostages, and then some of the mobs that came in following the invasion, and also, by the way, did damage and killed people. They took hostages as well. So we really don't know what the number is, with so many people still unaccounted for. But what I'd like to do today is to offer some fundamental background, which I hope will provide a better understanding of Hamas, the militant Islamist movement that initiated the present conflict and perpetrated these horrifying acts. And I hope this will allow those of you who are attending this webinar to have a clearer and a more in-depth understanding about with whom Israel is dealing, and I might add, with whom the world is dealing. As I'm sure everyone knows, Hamas is one of the two main Palestinian political and military organizations, the other being, of course, Fatah, as people usually call it in English, Fatah, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was founded by Yasser Arafat. Could I have the next image, please? Back in 1957, and now under Mahmoud Abbas, who is the current governing authority in the Palestinian entity in the West Bank. Hamas, since 2007, has controlled the Gaza Strip, which it wrested from the Palestinian Authority, and it's been in a sort of conflict, sometimes a real physical conflict, sometimes a conflict of words, and sometimes one that's sort of on hold with Fatah. In fact, in Arabic, we refer to it as the niza', the conflict bain al-Fatah wa Hamas. Hamas is the more recent of the two Palestinian movements. It was founded 30 years after the PLO in 1987. And like Fatah, it has a symbolic acronym for a name. Fatah, the word means in Arabic, victory for Islam, not victory for Arabic has different words for victories by others, but victory for Islam is Fatah. But it's a reverse acronym because the organization is Harakat Tahrir Palestine, the organization for the liberation of Palestine, but that comes out to Hataf, which is a very negative word for death, and so it works nicely for them as a reverse acronym. Hamas in Arabic means zeal, courage, strength, and the acronym is from Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement. And I should note here that the name Hamas evokes additional discomfort here in Israel for Israelis, since the Hebrew cognate word, which is already in the Bible, Hamas, means injustice, cruelty, violence. But perhaps, of course, this is ironically appropriate. Hamas was formed on December 10th, 1987, 2 days after the outbreak of the First Intifada, and was founded by Ahmed Yassin, if I could have the next picture, please, who, as you can see, was a paraplegic, an imam and a school teacher who grew up as a poor Palestinian refugee in Gaza. Yassin was a member of the Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the Islamic Brotherhood, and this is crucial for understanding Hamas's ideology and worldview, and indeed the mindset of most Islamists who absorb the teachings of Hassan al-Banna. There he is, also a teacher, I might add, who founded the Islamic Brotherhood in Cairo in 1928. Al-Banna was an Islamist, a Salafi revivalist. The Salafi movement is a movement to return to the Aslaf, to the forefathers, that basically he and the Salafis see Islam, not nationalism or modern political philosophies, as the solution for the Muslim world's revival from its decline, economically and every other way, and liberation from European colonialism and domination. As al-Banna put it, al-Islam huwa al-hal. Islam is the solution. And another thing, al-Banna declared violence to be a useful tool for political purposes, something which, of course, is followed by just about all Islamist movements. One of the things that sometimes is cited is the old Arab proverb, man la yadlamun nas yudlam. Anyone who doesn't harm other people is going to be harmed himself. And here is something that set Hassan al-Banna, together with most of the Islamists that followed him, including Ahmed Yassin, whom the founder of the Hamas movement, what set them apart from traditional Islam is an anti-Semitic worldview that, as I and others have written about extensively, was a patent import into the Islamic world beginning in the 19th century and only really struck deep roots in the 20th. Of course, it struck roots in the Islamic world, both with Islamists and with secular nationalists. And this worldview was buttressed by the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was translated into Arabic in 1925 by a Maronite priest in Lebanon. And here you see two different, it was back, I can't remember, around about 1990, in the late 90s and 1900. It was the best listed among the 10 best-selling books in the Arab world. And when I worked in the Arab world, mostly in the 1970s, one of the things that I would often do was go into bookstores just to see if they had copies. And I can assure you, I can't remember ever coming into a bookstore and not finding it. It was that widespread. The protocols were, in fact, even before they were translated to Arabic, were being used by nationalists. And from the beginning, it was an important text for Palestinian and Arab and nationalists in particular, but the Islamists, such as the Ikhwan, the Brotherhood, and later Hamas, justified it with texts from the Quran and the Hadith, the canonical traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, what he did and said. There are a number of these, but there are two in particular, which Al-Bukhari and Muslim, which I'll be we'll see citing from in the Hamas Charter. These anti-Semitic tropes, Jewish worldwide conspiracy, financial control, media control, etc., these were explained in the widely disseminated writings of the philosopher of the Ikhwan movement, Sayyid Qutb, who was hanged by Nasser in 1966. And al-Banna, by the way, was assassinated by King Farouk's secret police in 1949. And I should mention here that Arab regimes, whether claiming to be Islamic or nationalist, secular, pan-Arab secular, they have been very wary of the Brotherhood. And at present, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Syria have all outlawed it, since they regard it as a danger, rightly so, to their own authority. It sometimes becomes legal again, sometimes not. For a while, it was for the most part illegal in Egypt, and for a while after the fall of Sadat, there was, in fact, President Morsi, who was a member of the Brotherhood and who was overthrown by Assisi and was put to death. Now, since the Brotherhood's philosopher Qutb declared secularist Muslims and Muslim states to be deemed kuffar, to be unbelievers who should be fought and killed, you can imagine that the non-Islamist regimes have been extremely hesitant about the Brotherhood, and even when they support groups like Hamas, like Jihad al-Islami, all of which are offshoots of the Ikhwan, it's political, but also keeping at hand's length. However, by the way, I should mention the official Brotherhood today claims it is a peaceful, democratic organization, and that its leader condemns violence and violent acts. Now, this, of course, is an example of what is known as taqiyya, permissible lying to non-Muslims for the protection of Islam. It was mostly used in the past by Shiites dealing with Sunnis, but it also is permissible for Muslims to prevaricate for the sake of Islam or for their own safety. And I would note that it's no coincidence that the Ikhwan's principal state backer is none other than Qatar, the primary funder of Hamas, and at times the intermediary for it with the state of Israel. And by the way, Ismail Haniyeh, can I just have his picture up? You see him right here. Ismail Haniyeh, the senior political leader of Hamas, is resident in Doha, which is the capital of Qatar. He is not in the Gaza Strip at all. And his predecessor also was in residence in Qatar. And just recently, in fact, this past Saturday, Haniyeh met with the Iranian, does my arrow show up when I do that?
No.
No, but in any case, the person facing him, shaking hands with him, is the Iranian foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and they have met there also with other Iranian leaders in the past. Now, after this somewhat lengthy excursus on the Islamic Brotherhood, which I believe is absolutely essential for understanding the ideological soil from which Hamas grew, I want to turn to the historical evolution of the movement itself. As I mentioned a little earlier, the founder of the movement was Ahmed Yassin, just after the outbreak of the First Intifada in December 1987. 14 years earlier, in 1973, he founded a charity in Gaza called Al-Mujama' al-Islami, called in English for some reason Mujama al-Islamiyya, although the word is masculine, not feminine, but the English is always Mujama al-Islamiyya, which means the Islamic Center. And this, by the way, many of the Islamist organizations started as charities, or at least that is their image. The charity opened clinics, daycare centers, blood banks, youth clubs, and mosques, and this is on the model of the Islamic Brotherhood charities throughout the Islamic world. In fact, the Mujama' al-Islamiyya, or Islami, better Arabic, was actually recognized as a legitimate charity in 1979 by the State of Israel, which still administered the Gaza Strip at that time. The Israelis authorities considered the Yassin's group to be less militant than Fatah. And the Israeli administration allowed it to set up schools, clubs, and even the Islamic University of Gaza, which, by the way, was the first institution of higher education in the territory. Under all the years of Egypt, there never was a university there. And a number of today's Hamas leaders actually received their education in the Islamic University. Ismail Haniyeh, whom you see right there, the head of the organization, Yahya Sinwar, the next picture, please, who is the one you see a great deal because he is the acting head in Gaza itself, and Mohammed Daif, who is the supreme commander of the Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas. And Hamas, like the Brotherhood, like Jihad al-Islami, like the non-Islamist Palestinian Liberation Organization, like many of these organizations, it has two wings or two branches: the political and the military. And the military wing, which, as I said, is called the Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. This is named after a Palestinian who he was killed by the British police in 1935, but who actually fought against the French in Syria and Lebanon, and the British in the Palestine Mandate. He was a part of a group that wanted to completely free the Levant of foreign control. But then, after recognizing it as a legal charitable organization, in 1984, Tzahal, the Israeli army, raided a mujamma mosque in Gaza and found a weapons cache. Ahmed Yassin was arrested, but then in May 1985, he was released as part of the so-called Jibril agreement with the PFLP General Command, yet another extremist Palestinian organization. And this agreement, which shocked many people at the time, was made with then Prime Minister Shimon Peres's government, which freed 1,150 security prisoners in exchange for 3 Israelis. As I said, it was very controversial. By the way, one of the prisoners exchanged was not even an Arab, but Kozo Okamoto was one of the Japanese terrorists who committed murder at Lud, now Ben Gurion Airport. The Israeli cabinet backed Peres unanimously, but President Navon, I knew personally, thought it was a mistake, and one of the negotiators actually resigned in protest over this. Of course, Israel has had a number of such. By the way, many of the people who were released then fought against Israel in the coming years. Some of them including suicide bombers. But of course, there have been numerous cases of this. Of course, the most famous being the Shalit exchange, which was about 10 years ago, a little over. 2.5 years after Yassin's release, with the outbreak of the First Intifada in December 1987, Hamas he and others, a group with him, founded Hamas as an independent and Islamic Palestinian organization. And its ideological ties to the Muslim Brotherhood can be seen in its logo, which you see here, the one on the left of the screen, which is the Hamas. On the right is the Ikhwan's logo with the 2 crossed swords of jihad. The one on the of the Brotherhood reads "Wa'iddu," be prepared, and is from the Surah Al-Anfal, the 8th surah of the Quran, and is referring specifically to holy war. The one on the left, the Hamas, has the Aqsa in the center, the map of all Palestine at top, and inside the Palestinian banners on either side is the Tawheed, the statement of unity, La ilaha illallah on the right-hand side, and Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is the messenger of God on the left-hand side. I mean, it's an extremely Islamic-centered symbol. In fact, when we look at the charter or the covenant that Hamas adopted in August of 1988, just 9 months after its founding, in Article 2, it declares that it is, and I quote, one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. The charter, which consists of 36 articles in all, clearly defines the Hamas movement as part of a universal Islamic movement. It is very eschatological. It is very theological. Its watchword is Allah is its goal. The Prophet is its model. I'm quoting from it. The Quran is its constitution. Jihad is its path. And death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. It also states that when the PLO becomes Islamic, it will join with it. It looked upon it as not properly Islamic. And remember, in the view of the Brotherhood, remember Sayyid Qutb, secularist Muslims and political movements are kuffar, are kafirs. Article 7 of the Constitution, of the Charter, specifically quotes from the Hadith, the canonical tradition, in both the Sahih of Bukhari and Muslim, the two most canonical of all the 6 collections of tradition. And it says, and this is Article 6 of the Charter, and I quote, "The day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, and the stone or tree would say, 'O Muslim, O servant of God, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Ta'ala, faqtulhu.'" This, as I said, this is verbatim in the Charter. Articles 28 and 36 of the Charter are specifically anti-Jewish. There are anti-Jewish lines in various parts, but these, the last articles are specifically anti-Jewish, as well as anti-Zionist. And again, the wording, quote, "Israel, Judaism, and Jews challenge Islam and the Muslim people. May the cowards never sleep." This last line is a quote from Khalid ibn Walid, a companion of the Prophet and a hero in the early wars of conquest of Islam. The Charter also denounces the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt as treasonous, and cites the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And any of you interested in the full text is available in the Avalon Project, in English translation, in the Avalon Project, which is a collection of documents and in law and history of Yale University Law School. And you can find it online. There are also summaries of it, but you can have the verbatim text in the Avalon Project. 5 years later, Hamas opposed the Oslo Accords and the Israel PLO letters of mutual recognition. in which Fatah renounced the use of terrorism. Again, this is verbatim, the use of terrorism and other acts of violence, and recognized Israel as part of a two-state solution. Of course, we all know how that progressed. In 2007, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip and has ruled it ever since. Actually, many of the former PLO officials were thrown off the roof of buildings and killed in other fashions. And ever since 2007, it has had major and minor clashes with Israel. There was the hot winter of 2008-9, there was 2012, there was 2014, and of course, over this period, large thousands upon thousands of missiles, rockets were launched into Israel. Sometimes a very small number, maybe one or two, sometimes a very large number, as not only recently, but in the 2 years ago and so on. Now, during this time, Israel purchased longer and shorter periods of relative calm and quiet by allowing Qatar to deliver funds to Gaza via the crossing point with Israel, which since 2012 has been well over $1 billion, and this money was delivered in cash in the leases. If you could just have the next picture. There are many scenes of people going into the post offices and banks to receive the $100 bills. Israel also, on and off, allowed Gazan workers to come into the country for daytime labor. And I must say that some of the non-military mobs that came in 2 weeks ago on Shabbat and the holiday, they actually were people who had worked in some of these border kibbutzim, moshavim, and other communities, and pointed out places to the invading forces, and they themselves took part in the death and destruction. And as I mentioned, one of the reasons why we don't know the number of prisoners, of hostages, is because some of them took hostages as well. Now, Hamas also became PR savvy since coming to power in Gaza in 2007. Perhaps it took note from the PLO in the West Bank entity, which was able to speak in a more moderate tone for international public consumption, and with complete uncompromising militancy at home in Arabic. And in 2017, Hamas leader in Doha, Khalid Mash'al, could I have his picture, please? He issued a new Hamas charter, 42 articles this time. Already in 2010, he said that the original charter was, quote, a piece of history no longer relevant, but cannot be changed for internal reasons. And the new charter, while denouncing Zionism as a racist colonialist movement, specifically states in Article 16, with good political correctness. It states, quote, Hamas affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion, end quote. And Article 17 rejects the persecution of, and again I'm quoting, any human being on nationalist, religious, or sectarian grounds. It also says that it is part, and now it says it is part of the same framework as the PLO. So also it has softened the language with regard to that as well. The 2017 charter is not lacking, I would quickly add, in militant clauses and all sorts of hedging statements that, yes, Hamas, even one Hamas leader said that they were willing to make a temporary truce with Israel if they were to have the Palestinian territories for themselves, but this would only be temporary in any case. And of course, we have to consider this another example of taqiyya, this religiously sanctioned prevarication for the good of the movement. I would also note that, and I might say that some naive individuals have said that of course this was a change of heart on the part of the leadership. One member of a human rights organization said that the liberal members of the Hamas leadership were embarrassed by the original charter. But I would also note that one of the founding fathers of Hamas, Mahmoud Azhar, can I have his picture, please? He was on the original group that founded it with Yassin, and he stated outright that the original charter is still valid. So much for that. Now, my own belief is that, and especially when you listen, if you listen to, as I do from time to time, broadcasts from Hamas and so on, that the statements being made are totally in line with the original ideology. Now, I was going to end, I had hoped with a more positive note that the first reactions, which is true, the first reactions in the Arab world were guarded and generally reserved, and not the attacks upon Israel. The chairman of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghait, simply came out and urged an immediate halt to armed conflict between the two sides. Egypt warned of grave consequences from any escalation. Foreign Minister of Egypt, Sameh Shukri, said both sides should show restraint to avoid serious risks. The Moroccan Foreign Ministry, on the other hand, went a little further and said, and I quote, "The Kingdom of Morocco expresses its deep concern and condemns attacks against civilians wherever they may be." Again, hedging the language a bit. Qatar, on the other hand, immediately declared Israel alone is responsible for the present violence. Saudi Arabia called for an immediate cessation of violence between Israel and Palestinians. the United Arab Emirates called, again, this is all in the beginning, for restraint, and expressed, and again, I quote, sincere condolences to all victims of the crisis. But then afterwards, Bahrain and the UAE blamed Hamas for its initial actions. However, since many of the Jordan, by the way, forbade demonstrations along the border, but then you begin to see more and more anti-Israeli as Israel responded, and one of the complaints now that one sees in the Arab press is the harm done to innocent civilians in Gaza, and there has even been stronger language since the explosion in the Baptist hospital in Gaza City, which although Israel even played from giving away some of its security, but showing what they could listen in on, was a report from Islamic jihad person to a Hamas official that it was a rocket that Islamic Jihad had sent up that fell and did the damage and killed the people. However, that has not been changed in many of the Arab press reports, and I must say I fear that when Israel finally go, and it seems certain that Israel will go in to Gaza to try and completely uproot Hamas there. That at that point there will be not only in the Arab press but indeed so in the world press, which has been more sympathetic to Israel already, or even with all of the support Israel has received, there have been calls from the European Union, even from President Biden, whose visit to Israel was unprecedented in a wartime situation, and whose backing was very much appreciated by everyone in this country. Nevertheless, he did call for restraint and proportionality. One with wonderful British humor, I heard one British speaker saying, does proportionality mean that one should rape the same number of women and only kill the same number of infants and children, and so on? But of course, Israel is going to act, and it is that seems to be quite clear to everyone here, and I think in the rest of the world. So I think I will at this point break off, and I'm willing to answer questions if there are any. I saw that there were various things going on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, that's right. Well, can I just thank you so much, Professor Dr. Stillman, Noam, to us, for a wonderful summary of this very complex subject, actually. I think there are many people who actually have no idea about the roots of Hamas and its commitment to violence. I think there are a few questions. One that I thought was very interesting was one that often comes up, and that is Islam actually fundamentally anti-Semitic? If you read the Quran, I mean, did it need, the European theories of conspiracy and Jewish power to sort of to contribute to the foundation of Hamas. I think this argument is often put forward.
In a single word, the answer is it anti-Semitic? No. There are Islam. Look, all religions have contradictory things to say about others, but Islam has some anti-Jewish ideas and notions, nothing compared to those of Christianity. They are not Christ killers. They have a valid religion. I would just point out, again, to put things in some perspective, the Jerusalem Talmud says even the best of Gentiles is worthy of death. The Babylonian Talmud says the righteous of the nations have their place in the world to come. I'm happy to say that mainstream Judaism goes with the latter, not the former. Islam, look, if you want to have an idea of Islam and its attitude towards Jews, not to be pushing my own books, but I know that they're still available in paperback, both in the United States and in the United Kingdom, and one can see it's complex, but all in all, over time, Jews had their greatest flowering in the Islamic world. It's not for nothing that the founders of Jewish studies in Germany, the Wissenschafts des Judentums movement, devoted so much to the golden age of Spain, as they called it, and so on. Of course, there are no golden ages in history anyway, but certainly it was far more positive than that of Europe. There were periods when Jews were part of the mainstream society, with, of course, certain limitations. But Islam itself, yes, it has negative things to say about Christianity, Judaism, and so on, but it also has positive things to say about them. And Islam recognizes Judaism as a valid religion, not in its pristine form, but nonetheless still valid, and that already is quite a difference from that of Christianity. But in and of itself, the answer is no. And I would just say I was mentioning it to you, but I'll say it to everyone else as well. One of the things that has touched me so in this past almost 2 weeks is I have received emails from hundreds of people, including former students going back 50 years, and I see one of them is tuning in this evening. It was my student in 1973, and many others, including from the Islamic world, and from Morocco, even from Algeria, where even to write to me already is taking things, being a bit brave. From Turkey, from Egypt, there are many not only good people, but also people who have a more liberal version of Islam, and the Islamists, of which Hamas is a classic case. They, of course, have the very worst, and what they do is they integrate both religion and the secular European anti-Semitism.
So there was an interesting question about the relationship between Hamas and Wahhabism, or Hamas's ideology and Wahhabism.
Yes, that is an interesting thing, because the Wahhabi movement is a fundamentalist movement. But number one, the MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, is trying to somewhat, what shall I say, liberalize things. And again, I would just say, remember, religion can be used and abused in many ways. And Anwar al-Sadat used Islam to make war against Israel, and he used Islam to make peace with Israel. I must say that I've studied Islam all my life. There is much in it that speaks to us, to me, as someone who is a practicing Jew. Just as there are things in Judaism that some people practice that don't speak to me. And we do have to keep this in mind.
And can I add to that, what is the relationship between ISIS or ISIL and Hamas? I mean, a lot of the terrorists were found to have flags of ISIS on them. And of course, the comparison is being made quite frequently between Hamas and ISIS.
And not incorrectly, because ISIS and its forerunners, they all come out of the Brotherhood worldview. Yes, I mean, that ISIS, and by the way, this is something also people should keep in mind. People are talking now, Israel as well, that they're going to completely eliminate Hamas. Organizations, movements like this are not completely exterminated. They can be extirpated from where they are lodged and holding power. They can be weakened, but ISIS is still all over the world. I mean, we look at what happened to them, and we now see they're in Africa, they're in many, and yes, of course, there is an affinity between or amongst, for better grammar, amongst these groups, because they all do see themselves in the framework of the Ikhwan. And that's why I spent so much time talking about it, even though the talk was dedicated, the webinar is dedicated to Hamas, but to understand it, you have to understand the Ikhwan al-Muslimun.
Right. And what about Iran? Because I understand that Iran was the main funder for Hamas in recent times, but is there an ideological clash between Shiite Islamism and Sunni Islamism?
Absolutely. But remember the famous anecdotal bon mot, enemies of my enemies are my friends. And that, yes, at the moment, PLO and Hamas are also on the same side. But that doesn't mean that there isn't the nizah between the two between them, and that doesn't mean. Look, the Houthi movement in Yemen also from the beginning came out in strong support of Hamas, but the Houthis are anti-Sunni, and the basic philosophy is: right now we're together. We'll take care of them later on.
There was a question on Facebook. Did the Muslim Brotherhood have any responsibility in the Farhud, which was obviously the massacre in 1941 of Jews in Iraq?
Not that I know of. Iraq was a good example of a much more secularist pan-Arab nationalism, and the Farhud, which was sometimes people I still can't believe how some apologists try to play it down, but no, that it's interesting that the Iraqi nationalists also, by the way, very much made use of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and as you know, Iraq, the Farhud is when the pro-Nazi, indeed allied government with the Nazis had just fallen. Its leadership had mostly left the country, and this it starts actually with Iraqi soldiers attacking Jews who were going to the airport to welcome back the regent of the royal family. And then, of course, things spread horrifically to the massacre. And of course, as we know, the British, who had surrounded Baghdad and were right there, felt that they shouldn't go in because it would look as if the regent was coming back with their guns behind him. And it was only the day after when they brought in both Kurdish troops from the north and the British that they put things down. So, but it was not in the Islamist. It was not Islamist. There were, of course, people who were may have been devout Muslims who were in part of it, but there were also devout Muslims who were not, and indeed Muslims who took in Jewish neighbors and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just clarify the relationship between the PLO and indeed the PFLP and Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood? And you did say at the beginning that Fatah was victory in Islam.
Yes.
So surely there is a strong Islamic element in their ideology.
They make the PLO makes you the PLO, like, look, in the Arab world, you can't totally push aside Islamic symbolism, Islamic rhetoric, and so on. But if you look, for example, I'm sorry I didn't put it up, the PLO logo, it is not Islamic in its symbolism at all, and the movement may have made use of the word Fatah for its acronym, which came out very nicely in a reverse form, but it is not an Islamist movement. One treads very carefully and uses and certainly uses these things as they are convenient, but it is not. It really is not. And in fact, Hamas itself had said it would only be when the PLO adopted or became Islamic that they would join together with them. And of course, it was quite clear they had no expectation of that.
Right. And recently, I think there was a meeting of Hamas that actually planned a dystopian future for the Jews once they had achieved victory. Do you remember that meeting, and what kind of future was it? Would it have been, or will it be? I hope not.
Well, I mean, this is all of this is out of the Brotherhood playbook, and now, of course, what they're saying is something totally different, and that that of course they're not against Jews as such. They, in fact, one of the things also Hamas declared recently was that the Zionists have claimed that they are a Jewish movement and so on. They use Judaism as for their own purposes, but of course these are not the good Jews.
Okay, so I think we should really be wrapping up soon, because we've been going for quite a long time. I suppose it would be nice to ask whether you could look into your crystal ball and say what you think might be the future in Gaza, once this war is over. With an Israeli victory, we will hope.
Two of my standard lines back in the United States for years and years, when I was asked to be a talking head, which I sometimes did on television, but my standard lines were one, Lo Navi Anochi velo ven Navi, from the prophet Amos. I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, which means a professional member of the Prophet Guild. And the other one is, I'm a historian. I have enough trouble interpreting the past. I don't predict the future. That being said, I do believe Israel is going to, at least in the short term, is going to be victorious. In fact, I have no doubt. It is going to very much uproot Hamas. This time, I think they've learned the lesson that there's no dealing with them. Uproot them from Gaza, and the question is, where do we go from there? It is to be hoped that they can either find people within the Gaza Strip who will take over, or, and again, people make all sorts of compromises. The PLO come back. I don't think that would be the wisest decision. But again, I have trouble interpreting the past. I don't predict the future.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for a most wonderful lecture. Let's all hope for the best. Somebody asked if there is going to be a recording, and the answer is yes, there will be a recording. Hopefully it'll be up in a few hours, and it'll be available on the Harif YouTube channel, accessible at our website, which is www.harif.org.
Okay, now we're going to open it up for questions in a minute. Anyone who's calling themselves iPhone or iPad or other name, which we don't know who you are, we will take you out of the meeting, because we can't obviously have something we don't know.
So please change your name if you happen to be iPad or iPhone at the moment. We are particularly sensitive
Zoom user,
to any attempts to hack or any security threats, obviously at this time.
And if I may just, as after such a heavy conversation, end the way I've been married into a Moroccan family, an enormous tribal-sized family for 60 years. Ended, as we do such conversations, with the line, we should hear good tidings, words of comfort and salvation.
Amen. To that.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you
All
all.
people have changed their names. That's
Okay,
great. One I
good,
had to remove.
good.
Okay.
So just to tell everybody that we continue with our regular program of lectures next week. Next Tuesday, we go to Damascus, when we'll be talking about the last rich Jew of Damascus, a man called Yosef Laniado. And it will be a fascinating lecture, I'm sure.
Right, I've got the adverts there. Yeah.
So this is the commercial break.
Yeah, let me
coming
just
up.
if it comes up the right one. Is that right? Yes. Brilliant. Oh, yeah.
Oops.
We've got the share. I think yes. There we are.
There we go. That's next Tuesday, 24th of October at 7:30. And we carry on in, this is in December, actually. Have we got our November?
We'll have them all here. It's just
Yeah,
sequence
that's in January. So as you can see, we do have quite a variety of different talks.
There's 30th of November.
Yeah, the 30th of November. Please put it in your diaries. This is the official day to commemorate the exodus of the Jews from Arab countries and Iran.
And it's an in-person event.
There will be our particular event in London will be an in-person event, but you will be able to follow it on I think YouTube, if not on Zoom. There's one more event in November which we have, and that's an interview with a filmmaker, a Dutch filmmaker who has made a film about the exodus of Jews from Arab countries. So with that, let's open it up to anyone who wants to say anything.
Right.
You will be able to raise your hand.
Please raise your hand. Everyone can unmute themselves, but can you please raise your hand so we can do it in a dignified fashion? Daniel, then and me first. Like to speak, Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for an excellent presentation. Just a short question, maybe not straightforward question, which is, you've talked about the relationship between Islamism and Palestinian nationalism, which Lynn asked you about. But how would you see the relationship between Islamism and Pan-Arabism? How are they connected to each other, if at all?
Yes, Pan-Arabism, Islamism is essentially religious. They're actually the final vision of the Islamists is to have an Islamic world, not to have an Egypt, a Jordan, etc., but to have the caliphate reestablished. Pan-Arabism, it was essentially a secular movement. It was dominant for a while, but Nasser, of course, was the great voice of Pan-Arabism, but basically it began to decline after the '67 war, and in fact, the more Islamist movements became more and more dominant. Look, there are only up until relatively recently, you only had two countries in the Arab world, the modern Arab world, that had a real national identity. One was Egypt, the other was Morocco. Egypt, even King Abdullah, the grandfather of the present king, had the famous line, Al-Arab, Arab, wal Masr, Masr. The Arabs are the Arabs and Egypt is Egypt. And of course, anyone who's been to Egypt knows the whole country, as big as it is only 6 miles wide of living space along the Nile, plus of course the delta. Its history is everywhere for you to see, going back to ancient Egypt, and it has an identity. Also, it was the first country to have a form of nationalism going back into the 19th century. Arab nationalism is Egyptian nationalism, actually. And the other one is Morocco, which basically has been, although the different dynasties and overthrows and so on and so forth, but it has been a kingdom since the 8th century, a Sharifan kingdom for that matter, and so that has a strong identity. Other than that, there was the famous the book. I can't think of his name right now. He was an American television correspondent who was kidnapped in Lebanon, and he escaped after 6 months, and he wrote a book called Tribes with Flags, in which he pointed out that most of these countries did not have what we would call a national identity. And just look at what happened to Lebanon, look at what happened to Syria, look what happened to Iraq. These were countries that had very different ethnic, religious, and elements in them, and they didn't. Libya is another example. They were not countries in as we can think of it. They were much more in the model, actually, of places like Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. They came apart, and they really don't have that kind of identity. And the Islamists, their vision is of an idyllic future for everyone.
Right, Boris, I think, is next.
Thank you.
Bruno. Sorry, Bruno.
Oh,
yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, because I thought I saw someone on the line. Okay. I am, even though my name is Bruno Friedman, I am 50% Moroccan, and I've been living in Morocco for 71 years. I speak Arabic and various dialects of Berber, and I'm supposed to be Ashkenazi, but my tradition is much more Sephardic and specifically Moroccan. I come from an important family in Morocco from Tangiers, and also later in Casablanca, and the only minister in the times of King Mohammed was my uncle. I know Islam much more than I know Judaism. I've practiced it with friends and people that I've lived with all my life. Yet, I have to say something in the light of recent events, and there's a question next for you.
Good.
When I was a boy, I was shocked by what Moroccan Jews used to say, that you couldn't trust a Muslim even 40 years after their death. I used to say, how racist can you be? How horrible can you be? Etc., etc. And there comes a point in my life where I'm reaching 71 years old, and I'm still living there most of the time, that I wonder if 60 years wouldn't have been a better definition. This may sound radical and even a bit harsh, but unfortunately, I notice, getting old and close to death, that I have also been lying all my life. I've been practicing taqiyya myself. I never told them what I really thought. I always told them what they wanted to hear, but I was never unaware of what's going on. Because even in the softest appearing Muslim country like Morocco, on the 7th in the morning at 8 p.m., I called my friend. I'm in Paris now. I called my friend in Agadir and I said to him, Michael, 2 years of such love and fabulous interaction between the Israelis and the Jews of Morocco, back in Morocco since the Abraham Accords, in 15 minutes will be done forever. The good thing about Morocco is they can come back in 15 minutes a couple of weeks from now, because Hamas is the same enemy to Morocco, because Hamas supports the people who want to take the Moroccan Sahara. So There will be a moment of reckoning, but don't tell me that there is not within Islam anti-Semitism. You haven't mentioned Dima. The Dima is the positioning of Jews and Christians as second, third, or 15th class citizens, and particularly Jews, because as you know, there were never really Christians who lived under the Dima. If you think that the Hadiths or the Quran do not practice anti-Semitism or are far away from the Christian anti-Semitism, I may agree that they haven't had the time, but the structures are even worse than those of Christianity.
Bruno, will you let Norman
Yeah,
reply, please?
Is that your
This is-
question?
If I just some comment. First of all, I have an article which the statement that you heard from Jews about about Muslims is quite the same as Muslims have about Jews. There's in fact, in different versions, one of them is don't trust a Jew even if he's been a Muslim for 40 years. These ethnic forms of ethnic tension. Yes, of course they exist. I'm not saying that
but Muslims were never.
But by the way,
Muslims were never dominated by Jews.
No, but just I would point out, dhimma means pact of protection. A dhimmi is a protected subject. He's not equal, but he is protected. And and by the way, although there have been no Christians since the Almohads exterminated them in the 13th century, 12th
After the Romans they left, there was almost no Christians. After the Romans, they all left.
No.
Dr. Stillman,
And certainly not in what's today Algeria and Tunisia.
Oh, Algeria.
They were there until the Almohad massacres. As for, yes, look, the tension, those ethnic tensions, they can sometimes be put aside, sometimes they can't. Generally, and the rule is, and again, I'm not pushing my books, but read Jews of Arab lands. And one of the things, basically, when in good times, when the Muslim world was flourishing, when there was lots of wealth, good life to go around, then a lot of the more negative aspects in Islam, wearing distinguishing clothing for non-Muslims, for example, and so on, were conveniently ignored. In other times, in North Africa, they were strictly enforced up until the coming of colonialism. And it's a complicated. Believe me, I don't paint everything through rose-colored glasses, not by any means. And I'm well aware of these things. I would just point out, though, to you, even in modern Western countries, growing up, for example, one was taught by one's parents, not only, of course, to try to act like an Anglo-Saxon and so on, but also one was extremely careful not to in any way say anything that could be taken as you're being Jewish and so on. So again, look, I'm not comparing the United States and Morocco. I know Morocco well. I still have family there, and I taught in Morocco and so on. Believe me, I'm well aware of this. But again, there is a difference between there are things of anti-Judaism, and there's anti-Semit. When we use the term anti-Semitism, we're talking about a modern movement that is against Jews racially, against a whole variety of ideology. That there are plenty of negative things about Jews. I'm well aware of this, but all in all, one has to put it in some sort of historical perspective.
Sure.
And I don't think look, and sometimes it's on and off again. I just want, by the way, one little thing with aside from this 40 years and so on, when I worked in Morocco in the 1970s and had family, and I wrote a book about the town of Sifru, as it was called, Yerushalayim HaKtana Shel Morocco. And I remember, of course, there I couldn't hide that I was Jewish. I was there with family and so on, went to the synagogue and so forth. One day I went to the grocery store, and the Muslim grocer, making conversation with me, said, "It's an Israeli, yeah? You're an Israeli." That's what I understood. I didn't understand correctly. And I got in a panic. I said, no, I'm an American. He said, yeah, Israeli, American Israeli. And then I realized what he meant in polite Arabic, the better word for Jew, like Israelite in French.
Oui, en français. Yeah, yes.
Exactement, is Israeli. Since 1948, it's a dirty word. But this was a traditional town. He was using it to be nice to me.
Sure.
I was the one who panicked.
Bruno, can we let other people speak? We've got a queue of people who want to ask questions. Should we do two together as time's going on? We'll do Mike and then Boris. Both say your questions, and then we'll do the next batch. So first Mike, then Boris.
Thank you very much for a splendid lecture. I have a question which is perhaps another lecture. Who are Hezbollah?
I think that's another lecture. Shall
Right.
we do that for-
Well, I'm
And
setting
Boris?
it up for another lecture because
Thank
it's
you.
also important.
Right.
Abs-
Okay.
Absolutely. And so if I ever give that talk, I'll talk about when I was in Lebanon. And
Yes, well,
We need to know about that as well.
meeting with Sheikh Bashir Jamal's think tank 4 days before he and they were blown to Kingdom Come.
oh my goodness.
Okay.
Wow.
Thank you
But
very much.
that's another story.
Another time.
Okay.
Can I ask my question now?
Yes.
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 Okay.
First,
Okay.
thank you very much for the lecture, Professor. Very insightful and multidimensional, shall I say. A quick personal vignette. I am a Jewish person from Kiev. I live in US, yes, and I follow Harif lectures for a while and have enormous respect for Lynn and everybody for doing that. Very, very appreciative. Small personal vignette. I have an aunt in Ukraine, had an aunt in Ukraine who is 85-year-old person. When war in Ukraine started, I put my efforts and against her reluctance, because she was a single widow in Ukraine. She didn't want to go anywhere. And I moved her to Israel. I helped her to move to Israel. Now she is calling me on Skype and asking me, so where you want me to go now? Bombs are falling on my head here. So yeah, so I'm not expecting you guys to help me with this one. I am working on this. But here are my questions for Professor Norm. 3. First, and I will ask 2 specific ones and one more general. First, 2007 election in Gaza. It was very clear, I think, I was watching the situation for years, it was quite clear that Fatah will not win, that Hamas will win. It was under Bush administration. Why the hell this election was allowed? Because this whole election changed the dynamics and the direction which brought us to this thing. Another question, also specific to Hamas, and that is what do we know, what is the estimate, how strong is Hamas in West Bank and how it can participate in escalating situation further in West Bank versus Gaza? And my third general question is this term Islamist, which we all started using very often. And it seems like it's interchangeable with the word Muslim once in a while. Sometimes it's interchangeable with the word terrorist. So is there a proper definition or commonly agreed definition on a term Islamist, or you just use it as a term of convenience depending on political winds? Not you, Professor, but in a discourse. I'm done with my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. By the way, my father's family is from the Ukraine. My grandmother is from Shepatovka, and my grandfather is from Polnoy. So, in any case, one, why did they have the election? Believe me, they regretted it. They didn't think it was good. That's why there's not been another election since then. Number one. And number two, and it only shows you how lacking in insight the PLO was at the time. Number two, on the let's see if the repeat just.
Number two was how strong is Hamas in West Bank? And
Hamas
what
is,
are the dangers?
Hamas is actually, someone was asking just a moment ago about Hezbollah. Hamas is infinitely less strong than Hezbollah. Hezbollah is 10 times more powerful than Hamas. The one thing, of course, it does. We're not even sure how many rockets it still has in its cache, but it's not nearly as strong as that. And Hamas does not have. Hamas is very unpopular now, at least from what I know from intelligence sources and so on, with people. This is one of the reasons why, if Israel goes in, they might be able to find within Gaza some sort of leadership who can take over the Israelis don't want to occupy it for any length of time. They learned their lesson on that one. And as for the term Islamist, Islamists are Muslims, but not Muslims are necessarily Islamists. Islamist the term was created in order to define groups of radical, mostly Salafis, but not all, that is, who want to return to the way of the Aslaf, the forefathers, but basically they're guiding both worldview, their philosophy, their political framework is Islam of a certain type, and it is the idea of recreating the Islamic entity of before. Not they certainly are not of the philosophical brand of Islam. Islam had split in the Middle Ages. There was a period when it was rationalist. You had the Mu'tazilites. Jewish philosophy and theology is heavily influenced by medieval Islamic theology and so on. All of that is gone now. And we use Islamist as a way of not branding all Muslims with this kind of worldview. It's a Western term. It's not used by themselves, of course, but it's in a way of making a distinction between them and other Muslims. There are people who are more fundamentalist, There are people who are less fundamentalist, but the Islamists have a very specific Weltanschauung, worldview of how things should be, and that's why we use the term for them. But it's certainly not a term that they used.
And I think the last question tonight, because it's already getting after 10:30 in Jerusalem, I think Holly can be the last question tonight.
Thank you. First of all, Dr. Stillman, thank you so much for this webinar and explaining to us about Hamas. Stay well and stay safe. And secondly, I want to ask, where is Hamas's headquarters?
Where is
Hamas's headquarters?
The leadership of Hamas, that is the leader, has been in Qatar since before Hania, when Mash'al was there. The main, they also have offices in Istanbul and Ankara, and several other places as well. But basically Doha and Gaza City are the two centers for them.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Lynn, again for this webinar. Thank you, dolls. Stay well, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank you. Thank you for a fascinating talk. We're looking forward to you talking on Hezbollah next week. Or at some point in the future. It definitely should be on the program. Keep well, keep safe in Jerusalem. And if anyone wants to get Professor Stillman's books, they're available on Amazon in the UK. Just go on Amazon, look up Norman Stillman, and you will find all his books, and they are excellent value. And I'd like to have a final thank you. He's donated his fees for tonight to JNF UK, and they're going to be used in the Gaza envelope for counselling and things with the poor victims down there. So again, thank you for your generosity.
Yeah.
Yes, please. That's extremely important and necessary right now.
So I would like to add my thanks to you. No, fascinating. Thank you. And thank you all for joining me from all over the world. I see people from Paris, from Canada, from the US. No, it's wonderful to have an international family. So I hope to see you again next week, Tuesday, when we go to Damascus. So see you all then, and have a good weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Call to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Stay well, everybody. Stay safe.
Absolutely.
Wherever you are.
All the best for
We're trying.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Let's stop recording, then I can finish. Stop recording.